Comic Boom.
Hey guys, Comic Boom here to review Millennium, Legion of Superheroes, Part 2 of 2. And what this is supposed to be called, according to Brian Michael Bendis, is The Road to the Legion of Superheroes. Because, of course, the Legion of Superheroes do not actually appear in this entire series, except on the last page of this issue, finally issue 2. This is apparently, even though it's clearly advertised as being a Legion of Superheroes comic book, it's not. This is a Rose and Thorn comic book. That's all this is. This is not Legion of Superheroes, but that's already been established in the first issue. The first issue, of course, I was highly critical of. Unfortunately, this issue compounds the problems of the first issue, and it just gets, well, I won't say it gets worse. It just sort of stays the level of very poor, exceptionally poor storytelling for reasons which I'm going to get into here. But let's be absolutely clear here. If you're interested in the Legion of Superheroes, you do not, on any level, need to get this series. You certainly did need to get the first one. You don't need to get the second one here. It's grossly false advertising on the cover. It shows Superboy reaching for the Legion of Superhero ring on the cover. Blatant false advertising. Shame on DC. Shame on Bendis. There's no excuse for this level of insulting false advertising, because that clearly, blatantly, that's what this is. This is not Legion of Superheroes stuff. They appear on the last page, and once again, what this entire page is, this entire comic book, like the first one, is Rose and Thorn, the character of Rose and Thorn, just going through various timelines, because she's immortal. She never dies. She goes through various timelines and interacts with various different timelines in the DC universe in a totally sporadic, haphazard fashion. We have no idea what the timelines are other than what you could venture a guess at, where we are dealt with, she meets Booster Gold in what we know to be the 24th century, but that's not because we're told by Bendis, because I don't think Bendis knows when Booster Gold is in the future, but it's the 24th century, but that's not indicated in the story. We're in the OMAC universe, the one-man army corps, the OMAC universe. OMAC makes an appearance. I don't know when in the future that is. It's not indicated in the story, and I even Googled it, and I'm not even sure when the OMAC takes place in the future anyway, so that's not clear at all. And then I think it's sort of I think she almost has like an Adam Strange. She's wearing some sort of suit with a Zeta beam. There's some place in the future where she's wearing a white and pink astronaut suit with a rose on the helmet. I'm not sure what that's supposed to symbolize. And then she appears at some point in the future, even after that, where the Earth is destroyed and being reconstructed. And then she appears sometime after that, and eventually she ends up in the 31st century after the Earth's been reconstructed, and she meets the Legion of Superheroes, and she basically says, "Boy, do I have a story to tell you." Now, when Rose appears finally at the end of the series and the last page and says to the Legion of Superheroes, "Hi, my name is Rose and Thorn. Boy, do I have a story to tell you." The first question I have to ask is, what story do you have to tell? There is no story to tell. That you're immortal? That's not a superpower, okay? Nobody cares. Who cares if you're immortal? What does that have to do with anything? Why should anybody care? This series hasn't established why the reader is supposed to care about Rose and Thorn. So, what a waste. And I say again here that there's the problem with this entire 2 issues is that there's no rhyme or reason as to why we're shown different timelines in the DC universe. And it actually makes it really, really bad, because it establishes beyond any shadow of a doubt that the present day superheroes, in fact, are abject failures, because they fail. They fail completely to prevent the Batman Beyond universe 35 years hence, which basically is a terrible universe that Batman Beyond lives in. So they failed to prevent that. They failed to prevent the Great Disaster. They failed to prevent the OMAC universe from coming into play. They ultimately failed to prevent the destruction of the planet. In fact, when in the 24th century, when Rose is talking to Michael, who will become Booster Gold, he's making references to watching the show Friends, which again is a terrible thing, because it establishes Bendis makes the cardinal mistake for a writer. He should know better with a writer of experience. You should never, ever, ever, ever ever make your storyline dated like that, because it doesn't work. Because if Rose and Thorn remembers Friends, then in fact what that really means is that she was around in the 80s. The problem is that this story no longer becomes timeless if it's read 10 years now, or 20 years from now, or 30 years from now. It's a big mistake. But in any event, Booster Gold, or the future Booster Gold, Michael, in the 24th century, he hits on Rose and notices, he picks up on her accent, that she speaks with what he believes is a 20th century accent, because he watches all these old episodes of Friends on the Bing channel, Chandler Bing, if you get the Friends reference. In any event, I thought it was stupid. And he basically tells her that apparently the Earth's been destroyed twice already. Humanity's had to start over twice because they failed. And Rose and Thorn very rightly says that the heroes were losers and that they had hope and they failed, and she's absolutely right. And as a reader, as somebody who really loves rebirth, I'm depressed. It's completely depressing. We know that the heroes have failed. So what's the point of reading Scott Snyder's Justice League now? Doom obviously wins, and if it doesn't win, what's the point of Doom losing? The Earth's going to be destroyed twice over. Humanity's going to have to start over twice. That's a message of hope. It's a message of abject failure. That's not why I read DC. I don't know. No editors? No one talked to Bendis? None of those timelines are supposed to exist in this existing timeline anyway. They have their own alternate Earths. The Kamandi, 10,000 years in the future, which it can't be 10,000 years in the future anymore because that's past the 31st century, so Bendis has already screwed that up. All these futures, where's the hope? So all these horrible futures we now know as a fact that our heroes failed to prevent. And Booster Gold talks about the different crises and how humanity barely survived the 20th century and the 21st century. Yeah, but they did. Only not to survive the Batman Beyond future, not to survive the Kamandi future, not to survive the future where the one-man army car OMAC comes in. This whole thing is really, really depressing. And then to have Rose and Thorn, which has got to be my vote for the most unlikable character now. She was infinitely more interesting when the Rose and Thorn series came out, written by Gail Simone. She was actually interesting. Bendis doesn't get it. And it's particularly galling when you're reading this series and Rose. One thing about Rose and Thorn, one thing that Bendis, I criticize this dialogue, but let me make another comment about dialogue here that I think is quite relevant. Let me give you an example if you go to Australia for 1 year, and you're a Canadian or American. If say you're American and you go to Australia for a year and you come back, what do you think is more likely? If you come back from Australia after living there for 1 year, do you think you're going to sound more Australian, or do you think after 1 year in Australia that all of Australia is going to end up sounding like you, with your dialect, with the way you speak? You know where I'm going with this? The point is that how you speak and your speech and your intonation, it is influenced by the societies upon which you live. This is just common sense. I've had people that come back on long trips that come back. If they stay there you stay in Australia for a year, you stay in Britain for a year, you come back, you're going to have hints in the inflections of your voice of the place from which you came. That's just the way it is. Here we have Rose and Thorn living to the 31st century, living for another, good Lord, another 1,000 years, and she's kept her exact same voice, her exact same dialect, not influenced at all. Still the same terrible dialect, still referencing things in the 80s. She calls OMAC Mr. T. She's in the 24th century and she's talking about, and she's rattling off things about Friends. It's just really nonsense, and it doesn't fit. And then she bitches and whines that the darker aspect of her nature won't allow her to have relationships and everything else. Why do we care? So you're going to make this more depressing? So now Bendis has established that every future is an absolute bundle of misery. There's nothing but death and destruction and misery everywhere. But now we're all supposed to smile, hold hands, sing Kumbaya, because on the final page of this ridiculously decompressed 2-issue nightmare, we get the Legion of Superheroes, and they're sitting there taking pictures and they're all smiling. Why are you smiling? I'm not. Good grief. Anyways, I'm so glad this series is over, but this cries out for a review. This is one of those issues here that is so awful and so bad that it cries out. Now, if you'll note now here in this 9 minutes of diatribe or so, or whatever I'm at now, who cares really? I haven't said anything about the artist. What's there to say? Bendis is once again, he's not saved by great art. But I will mention the artists. They are Nicola Scott, Jim Chung, Jeff Deckel, Ryan Sook, colorist Tomu Murray, Jordi Belair, and the letterer was Dave Sharp. And they did an exceptional job. The art here was really good. Unfortunately, so what? The story is utter garbage. Do not get this comic. It's not worth it. I don't know if I seriously don't know if I want to get the Legion of Superheroes. Why would I want to get the Legion of Superheroes? Seriously, why? It's going to be a decompression nightmare. I mean, I don't even know. In fact, I don't even know. Is this the 31st century? I don't even know if this is the 31st century. Bendis hasn't told us. And we can't, remember, Bendis has not established, he's not set down, he hasn't established that he has any working knowledge of the DC universe. His abysmal failure with Superman, his failure with respect to his own titles coming to DC, his knowledge of the DC universe is not very good. The horrendous event Leviathan, the biggest non-event in the last 25 years. Wow. In any event, guys, tell me what you think of Millennium. Not that you're going to change my mind, but tell me what you think of Millennium issue 2 of 2. And yeah, I'll talk to you later. I'm going to the New York Comic Con, and honestly, I don't even know if I meet Bendis, I don't even know what I'm going to say. It's like I feel like I should shake Bendis' hand and say, I'm sorry? Or, I don't know, read a happy book? Because whatever you're doing, Bendis, you're not a happy guy. Not from what you're writing. Is your life that miserable? You almost I heard he almost died in the hospital. And all he can write is depressing stories. Like, seriously, most people, if you're glad to be alive, why don't you write stories filled with hope and rebirth? Apparently not. Apparently having an I almost died experience means that you're going to write depressing stories. Anyways, with terrible dialogue. In any event, guys, Comic Boom out.